So finally, after all this time, we do have something to talk about when it comes to XDefiant, and that is the fact that for those who weren't aware, over the weekend they have had the early preview event, I guess you would say. It is technically just a beta. They didn't really call it a beta though, and it was mostly to test the servers. So from the 19th to the 21st, the game has been playable for about a 48-hour window there. I clocked up probably 5 to 6 hours of playtime over the course of that weekend, and so today I wanted to break down all my thoughts surrounding the preview, because obviously we have had multiple of these at this point, and I kind of want to talk about this one compared to the ones in the past. Now, I've got a list of pros and cons here, and unfortunately when it comes to this specific preview, I've actually only got a few pros where there is a pretty big list of cons. That is not necessarily talking about the entire game in general, so it's not like overall in the game there are way more cons than pros, but in terms of this preview I do think there are a lot more cons, and so this may come across as a super negative video, almost sounding like I'm saying the game sucks. I don't think the game sucks, but I'm only judging off of this preview, and so without wasting any time, let's get stuck right into it. Now, in terms of the pros, the obvious key thing here for most people is the fact that this game has no skill-based matchmaking, and that is once again very prevalent when it comes to the preview. Now, that being said, I do think the preview felt very sweaty, but that is to be expected when the game is not, you know, in its global launch. The majority of people who are playing early betas and stuff like that are the more hardcore players, so it did still feel pretty damn sweaty at times there, and it almost felt as though there was SBMM. I could definitely tell there wasn't, because it was a varying range of games. I'd have one game where I'd, you know, dominate the game, and then the next game I'd kind of get slapped, and my kill death ratio was very sort of up and down compared to when you play Call of Duty, for example. You pretty much just seem to go like 20 and 20 every game, and so it is a nice breath of fresh air to have a game where it is just you matched up against people who have got good ping. You're all in a lobby together, and it's not really based on skill, and so therefore the best players in those lobbies are going to do better. And I think that's really how it should be. Now, before I get into the cons as well, the only other pro that I've written here for this specific playthrough is that when this game does play well, it plays really well. I had a few games where everything was just kind of clicking. There weren't any like bugs or issues with hit registration in the netcode and stuff like that. And when the game is fun, it is super fun. I really genuinely enjoy the game, but unfortunately when it came to this preview, that was not every single game. In fact, the majority of games did not feel that way. So I wanted to throw that in there as a pro, because like I said, majority of this stuff is going to sound super negative, but I think when the game works as intended and when everything sort of clicks, the game is super fun. But unfortunately, I think they've got a few things to iron out before that actually happens. Now, in terms of the cons, my biggest issue with this preview is that it's been about 10 months now since I first played XDefiant. There was the early preview in, I think, June or July last year. That was technically the beta, and the game was meant to be launching not too long after that. So the game was meant to be in a pretty, you know, ready, finished state until they actually had to delay it because they found something in the tech test, which I think happened in September. So in that playtest back in July, I think it was, the game back then felt pretty much identical to how it feels right now. And my main issue with this preview is it feels like the game has made exactly 0 improvements in roughly 10 months now. Now, the thing to keep in mind with that is that because this is an early session, it's a beta essentially, they aren't trying to put in the new content. They're not trying to show us everything that they've got. There is a lot more to the game than what we're getting in the preview, and so it is kind of hard to judge on how much they've actually improved. They did say that this is essentially the same build that they gave us back in July last year. They're just trying to test the servers when it comes to this one. So this entire preview was not to test, you know, every element of the game. It is mostly just to test the servers, to make sure that there's no like server crashing and, you know, stuff to do with the netcode and all that kind of thing. So take that with a grain of salt. Even though it feels like no improvement has been made, it's hard to judge. Like, we are not actually playing the current version of the game, which I find super odd. I don't know why they would give us the same build that they gave us back then. For me personally, I would be wanting, if I was in charge of the company, if I was Mark Rubin, I'd be wanting to show off some of the new stuff that we put in there to make people feel excited and, you know, see the tangible improvement the game has made. Because although this, yes, is a preview to test for Ubisoft for their servers and that sort of thing, this is also trying to sell us players on playing this game, and you do have to make a good impression. Because for me, honestly, I was taken a little bit aback by this preview session in that I'm not as confident in this game as I was 10 months ago, and that is probably because it feels exactly the same as it did 10 months ago. Now, ironically, they are obviously testing this preview for, like I said, the servers, so that's to do with the netcode, the hit registration, all that sort of thing that comes with the online aspect of the game. They're not so much testing for like balancing and all that kind of thing. Now, unfortunately, the netcode and the hit registration in this preview is absolutely atrocious. There's so many times when bullets just aren't going where they look like they should be going, which is generally a hit registration thing. It could be to do with recoil and maybe I'm just not used to the game or something, but generally when that happens, if you are looking at someone and you shoot and it looks like the bullet should hit and it doesn't hit, that is generally a hit reg issue, which all sort of comes down to the netcode. And overall, the netcode just does not feel very good in this game. And weirdly, it actually feels worse than it did 10 months ago, as well as in the PC test that they did in September last year too. There's also a lot of desync, which is essentially, it's kind of the same thing in a way. The easiest way to explain desync is sometimes you can feel as though you've gotten around the corner when someone's shooting at you, for example, but then you still die, and it's kind of like, how can they have shot me? I'm behind cover. That is because your console or PC is kind of desynced from the servers, and so on your screen you're behind cover, but on the actual servers and on the other person's screen you're not behind cover yet, and that is happening a hell of a lot in this game. And again, that comes down to the netcode and just the servers in general. They don't seem to be handling it that well. Now, that is really the key issue for me, is just the way that the online element of the game feels. The servers do just feel a little bit hit and miss, I guess, but I do have a lot of other negatives here that I want to talk about. I'll get through them pretty quick because I don't want to, sound like a whinging little bitch complaining about every element of the game, but obviously we're talking about the preview, so I'm going to give my honest thoughts. One thing that really surprised me is the graphics just look not good. I don't know if they're like a downgrade from how they were in the past. Keep in mind, the last playtest that I played was the PC one, so I was playing on PC last time, whereas this time I'm on the PS5, but the graphics just look pretty damn bad, if I'm honest, mostly when it comes to like the play models and stuff. Now, I don't think that matters. I don't need a shooter to be like super high graphics and stuff, so it's not really an issue. It's just that the game kind of feels like it's like a previous gen video game instead of a game that I'm playing on my PS5. It almost looks like this was made for like the Xbox One and PS4 era. Matchmaking was also taking a very long time. I don't know if that's just because like a lack of players or something. I'm not too sure. Obviously, being in Australia, there are much less players here than there are in places like the US or Europe. But yeah, it was taking a long time to find a game. It would find people immediately, but then it would take like, I don't know, 2 minutes sometimes to just find that last person. So it felt more like an actual like a bug than just lack of people. That being said, I was constantly coming up against the same gamer tags, so I definitely think there's not that many people playing this preview when it comes to the Aussie servers. I also kept joining games midway, even after staying in the lobby. I think that's fair. If you search for a game and then you get put into a lobby midway, I can understand that because you're searching and it's just kind of put you in the best lobby. But after a game is over and you stay in that lobby, it is disbanding the lobby still, even though there's no skill-based matchmaking, and then it'll put you into a new game, and sometimes that is still making me join midway when you've got a pool of people there who were just in the last game. You should just be putting all of us into the same lobby, and in fact you shouldn't even be disbanding the lobbies because there's no skill-based matchmaking, so there is literally no reason to do that. Something else that I found, and again, I know it's a beta, so this will most likely be ironed out in the actual game, but half of the settings in the game just do the exact opposite of what they say. So there's certain buttons, for example, like the scoreboard button, you have to press it twice to actually get rid of it, rather than how it should be, where you hold down the button to see the scoreboard, and as soon as you let go, the scoreboard goes away. I changed the setting and it didn't even change that. So there was the same with that, as well as a few other settings, something to do with the minimap. I think they were actually doing the opposite of what they said in the settings, where it's like the minimap rotation, little things like that that just definitely need to be ironed out before the game actually launches. Something else I've got an issue with is the freaking HUD is absolutely enormous, and it's like in the middle of my screen. I don't know why it's not on the corners of my monitor, and in most games you can adjust where the HUD is, because some people actually like to put it in closer to their screen so they don't have to like look as far. For example, if you've got like a big monitor, having the HUD, I guess, closer to the center of the screen means you can see it a bit easier. For me, I want the exact opposite. I want the HUD as far away from the center of my screen as possible. And even when you change the settings to, scale it up and down, one, it barely changes at all, and secondly, when you spread it out, it actually goes further into the middle. So I think that's bugged. I'm not really sure, but if that's how that is intended, the HUD honestly looks atrocious. I do not like the HUD being so damn big. Look at the gameplay right now. Why the hell is my like ammo and all that shit not in the bottom right corner? It's like 20% further into the screen than it needs to be. And so yeah, I don't know if that's a bug, but if it's not a bug, they need to fix that. Everything should be pretty much borderline touching the edge of the screen. Get that shit out of my line of sight. I need to be seeing enemies, not the HUD. Honestly, to me, the game just doesn't feel up to par. Back in June or July of last year, it did feel really solid, and I think if it had launched then, the game felt ready to launch, whereas for some reason now, it just feels like it's taken a step back, even though it shouldn't have. There's nothing that's really changed about it. The game just does not feel like a next-gen shooter. Maybe it's because we're an extra year almost into like the next generation, I guess. It's an extra year that I've had my PS5 and my Xbox Series X. Maybe I just expect the game to have gotten 1 year better, and it really should have. It's been roughly 10 months now since we first played it. It should have gotten 10 months better, if that makes sense. And realistically, it just feels exactly the same as it did back then, if not arguably worse, because of the netcode issues and stuff like that. And even to do with the movement and stuff, it just doesn't feel like it did 10 months ago. And it doesn't really feel like a next-gen game. It honestly feels like this game is made for like the Xbox One and PS4 era, which, don't get me wrong, if the game's fun, that's fine. I don't need my shooters to be like super realistic and all that kind of thing. If it's fun, I don't care if it's made for freaking PS2, but it just doesn't really feel up to par. I saw someone on Reddit say it feels like this game is a mobile game that they ported to consoles, and I audibly laughed when I heard that, because that is genuinely how it feels at times. There are a few moments it feels super clunky, the animations, the graphics and stuff, it just doesn't really feel like I'm playing this on a PS5. So again, I can't really put a finger on that. I did not feel that way in June or July last year. I did not feel that way in the September playtest, but right now I feel as though the game is worse somehow than it was back then, even though I know it's not. Nothing's changed, nothing has gotten worse, at least nothing I can put a finger on anyway. And I don't think that stuff is to do with the netcode either. I think they've almost just missed the boat that we were all kind of looking for a casual shooter that time last year, and yeah, maybe they've just missed the boat there. I'm not too sure. I want you guys to leave a comment down below if you feel the same, or also let me know if you think I'm talking shit. I can't really put a finger on it. Keep in mind, I've been sick for the last like 2 weeks now, so maybe I'm just an old grumpy bastard. I don't know what's going on, but although I still had a fair amount of fun with this preview, the game just does not feel like it's ready for launch, when 10 months ago, I was shocked that they delayed it because it felt ready for launch back then. Like I said, leave your thoughts down below. I'm keen to hear what you guys think of the game so far. I'm curious to see what happens from here. Keep in mind, I'm recording this a day or two before it goes up, so if we have gotten any news post the playtest, I'll probably talk about that in the next video. I'm not too sure if the launch is going to be anytime soon, or if they're going to get a heap of negative feedback from this and just keep pushing it back until later in the year. So let me know your thoughts down below. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.